At this time, since Shane Smiley's going to kind of go back through some of the history prior to 1904 up to 1958. Joe Williams is going to pick up from 1958 on forward. And then at that time, we'll do the major reason that you're here today. Certainly a big time for Fairgrounds Speedway. I go back for many years. Every promoter that's been here since Bill Donahoe worked for every promoter, and I think the last time that I've been this excited at this track certainly goes back to the day when Uncle Bob Harmon announced that the NASCAR series was returning to Nashville, Tennessee. And I think this announcement will certainly be very vital to the economy of Nashville, Tennessee, and make Fairgrounds Speedway stand up and above for the future. I'll turn it over now to Shane Smiley.
And try not to take a whole lot of your time with this, but I think as we're here, especially with this date, that it's important to go through some of the history of the fairgrounds. The property of the state fairgrounds is a property rich in history dating back to the time before there even was a state of Tennessee, or before there was a city of Nashville. The fairgrounds is the last and largest portion of a 640-acre tract of land that belonged to an early settler, John Rains. Rains Avenue is right up the street. On a cold wintry day, Christmas Day of 1779, Rains and his family crossed the frozen Cumberland River, which I don't think we've seen in many years, but the frozen Cumberland River with James Robertson and 200 other settlers to what was to become Nashville. Before there was country music, before there was a Ryman, there was horse racing in Nashville. And at one time there were 6 racetracks running at the same time in Nashville for horse racing. The most prominent of those tracks was called Cumberland Park, which sits right here on the grounds of what is now the Tennessee State Fairgrounds. Harness racing was a huge tradition. At one time, Cumberland Park hosted the largest purse in the world of horse racing. If you were anybody in horse racing, this is where you wanted to be and where you wanted to compete. In 1904, a new era ushered in with the advent of automobile racing here at Cumberland Park. Horseless carriage racing started at the racetrack on June 11, 1904. Among the drivers of the legendary first 2 races include Indy racing pioneer Barney Oldfield, and speeds reached an incredible 60 miles an hour on the track. This is before Indianapolis Speedway was even built. Daytona and NASCAR weren't even thought of at that point. This is the second oldest racetrack in the entire country, only behind Wisconsin. The automobiles continued to race, and horse racing, the interest declined, mostly because of the outlawed gambling in the state of Tennessee in 1906. And in 1909, Davidson County, with a special bond authorized by the state legislature for the purpose of establishing a permanent state fairgrounds. This property right here has been the site of the state fair since 1906. One of the other big events that happened here, and actually 101 years ago this week, was an exhibition brought on by the U.S. Army for maneuvers and exhibition attended by the Secretary of the Army and over 20,000 people. Around 10 p.m. on the night of June 22nd, 1910, noted airman Charles Hamilton took off from the racetrack, making the first night flight in aviation history. It was about a 30-minute flight. He reached about 600 feet in elevation, buzzed around here with a spotlight strapped to the bottom of the aircraft, facing forward. He buzzed around, and over the field over here, made his landing. First one in history. Now you got to remember, most people in Nashville had never seen an aircraft at that point. Aviation was only 4 years old at the time that this took place. Another innovation that they did that week during the exhibition was they dropped bombs out of an airplane. This was only the second time on record that had ever done. They just tilt the aircraft and he'd drop bombs onto a target. So it was considered to be very innovative. At the end of the week, in fact 101 years ago today, the National Board of Trade presented Hamilton with a gold medal encrusted with diamonds to commemorate the event. This place has been so steeped with history and moving forward and always changing and progressing. One of the other real unique things about this track and this facility is there's a racehorse named John R. Gentry. He dominated horse racing for years. At one point he approached the 2-minute mile in harness racing and only missed the 2-minute record by 0.25 of a second. He was the biggest name in horse racing for many, many years, and upon his retirement, they set up a special stall here on the fairgrounds for him. And he stayed there until he died, and he's actually buried right down here in the infield. So this has always been, one thing has remained constant. The fairgrounds continues to be a place of celebration, a place of innovation, and a place of progression. And what we're working toward today is progressing to continue racing in Nashville and continue this long heritage that this property has. You know, it's always been a place for families and friends to gather, celebrate, and to compete. And that pretty much takes us up to the history of the place through the late 40s, early 50s. And I'm going to turn it over to Joe Williams, and he's going to take you through the rest. I appreciate your time.
A couple of notes. I'm probably going to spend more time on the racetrack in the 50s, actually 1958, 57. The late Bill Donahoe wound up with a contract with the then State Fair Board in the city of Nashville to run events on the old 1-mile dirt track. And that's it. That thing literally stretched from 5 Points all the way back up past the Wedgwood entrance now. A year later, he and his partners got together and with their own money cut that track down into the original configuration of Fairgrounds Speedway. It's 5/8 of a mile, had 24-degree bankings. It was called a parabolic racetrack. The theory being that a car should be able to go just as fast in the middle of the corner as it could down the straightaway. And on August 10th of 58, there was a sold-out crowd of more than 13,000 people. In 1958 was a huge, it was like having 60 or 70,000 today. 13,000 people sat here, watched Joe Lee Johnson win the very first NASCAR Cup event at this racetrack. Through the 60s, NASCAR held 2 races a year here. The original fairgrounds unfortunately fell victim to the Great Fire in 1965 that basically wiped out the top of the state fairgrounds. The women's building, the grandstands, pretty well documented if you look back. As a matter of fact, I believe it was opening night of the state fair in '65. And believe it or not, it was a concession stand short. But all the buildings were wood. They'd been here for so long. The new grandstand was completed in '68, basically what you see here. Done in phases, but when it was completed in '68, the American Society of Civil Engineers actually gave an award to this facility for having the best venue for watching events in the country, because the way that they designed the cover, there's not a post to be found. There's no place that you can sit inside this facility and be blocked by a post supporting the grandstand. Now, during that time, weekly racing was king. The names that came through there are legend, and into the 60s and the 70s, probably when we really started to see a connection between country music and racing in Nashville. Probably the first who really got it going was a guy by the name of Marty Robbins. You may have heard of him before. On more than one occasion, Marty Robbins, having to make his performance time at the Ryman Auditorium downtown, either pulled out in the middle of the race, or on 2 occasions I know of, he actually finished the race because he was running in the top 3, but instead of stopping, he hit the corner, went out the back gate, and drove his race car all the way down 2nd Avenue to get to the Ryman Auditorium in time to change clothes and get on stage. His crew had to come pick him up and pick up the car. It was in the early 70s that we saw a brash youngster out of Kentucky show up. We had never seen anything quite like him. He won 2 track titles here, eventually won 3 cup titles. He's now obviously a commentator for Fox Sports and kind of a multimedia conglomerate just in his own right. And I think his name is Waltrip, or Cartrip if you're going to Cars too. But yeah, Darrell Waltrip came in out of Kentucky about that time. The track had its first facelift in the early 70s. Started actually a little bit in the 60s, the design phase did. And what they decided to do, Mr. Donahoe and his partners, again with their own money, took the racetrack from 5/8 of a mile, cut it down a little bit, but increased the banking to 35 degrees, which is almost like trying to walk up a mountain. In the process, they created the fastest racetrack, and to most accounts, the toughest racetrack in the entire country, especially when you're talking about a weekly event. They also found out that it was awfully tough on equipment. So in 1972, they reinvested again and tore down the bankings and created the configuration that you see today. 0.596 miles officially, 18-degree banks in the corner. In the process in between, though, the folks at Bristol, trying to one-up Mr. Donahoe, did take their banks to 36 degrees, and they still stay there now. Now, in the late 70s, Mr. Donahoe retired. He passed the lease on to a group that canceled weekly racing for 79. His original lease was for 30 years. He had the opportunity to make some improvements and do some things. Obviously, he did. Building the track and then reconfiguring it twice. It looked like after 79 that there could be some jeopardy for local racing. Well, Gary Baker took over the facility in 1980. He returned weekly racing back to its regular schedule. He also continued the tradition of the NASCAR Cup races coming in, and in 1980 there was another brash youngster. This one came over from North Carolina, driving a car driven by now music mogul Mike Curran, and won a race here in 1980. He also went on to win 7 Cup titles. His name was Dale Earnhardt. You probably know him better now as a senior. In 81, Bob Harmon, Rex Robbins, and Baker took Harmon's idea of a national event for mainly weekly racers to fruition with the first All-American 400. Now, for 20 years, the All-American 400 was the single largest event outside of a NASCAR Cup race in the country, held right here. One year in particular, in the middle 80s, there were 110 cars from 32 states and 3 nations that showed up trying to make a 40-car field. They literally came from everywhere. In 1984, the track developed the new late model stock car rules that NASCAR adopted, and they spread throughout the Southeast and became the pattern upon which every other weekly racetrack set their rules. The first live nationally televised weekly racing event came out in Nashville in May of '84. It's a 100-lap race right after qualifying for the May Cup race. USA Network carried it live. In 1985, unfortunately, NASCAR withdrew from Nashville despite having 2 Cup races on the schedule. It again appeared that the racing locally could be in jeopardy, but again, the track rebounded. And in 85, 86, 87, and 88, it was the #1 attended weekly facility in the entire country. In 1990, Bob Harmon, who we affectionately call Uncle Bob, went from just coming in for 1 race a year. He came in and obtained the lease, brought the track back to being a national leader. He returned NASCAR through its now nationwide series to this racetrack, brought the Truck Series to this racetrack. Became a favorite, Nashville did, of live broadcasts on the old TNN, the Nashville Network. They just continued to increase this combination of racing and country music and just really began to weld it and meld it together. It was also during the late 80s, early 90s that we saw the very first Mark Colley celebrity race, which brought in anybody who was anybody in country music for an event in October as a benefit for diabetes research. As a matter of fact, I believe it even functioned to fund a chair on diabetes research at Vanderbilt University, which continues today, just on the things that were there. Now in '89, in the late 90s, Harmon passed the lease to Dover. That company built Nashville Superspeedway, took both of the NASCAR events to that venue. In the early 2000s, a young lady by the name of Deborah Renshaw became the first female in NASCAR history to lead the point standings, at the mid-year point anyway, in any premier division on the weekly racing series that NASCAR promoted. Going to leave some people off here because the list of folks who've come through this place since 1958 is way too long. And it's not just drivers. You know about Cuckoo Marlin, you know about Sterling Marlin, you know about Darrell Walter, you know about Bobby Hamilton Sr. Bobby Hamilton Jr. had his own very positive career on both what is now nationwide and the Cup level. Mike Alexander won national championships in NASCAR. Jeff Green, David Green, two brothers, both won national championships in what is now the Nationwide Series. Casey Atwood, youngest kid ever to sit on the pole for a race at Daytona. Awfully fast down there. But there are others. Throw a couple at you. Gil Martin, who's the crew chief for RCR Racing, and Kevin Harvick. He and Bobby Hamilton in '87 and '88 were basically an unstoppable force at this racetrack. But there's also officials that have come through here. Former track champ Walter Wallace was a longtime NASCAR official. Doyle Ford was a longtime NASCAR official, better known for the years that he spent in the flag stand as a chief starter. Donnie Red, one of the scorers for NASCAR even today. Coley Turner, a couple others. Kevin Moss, who is the flagman for the Nationwide Series today, started on the back of the cleanup truck here at Nashville. We were kidding earlier, I think we paid him $10 a night. We got it back when he went to concession stand. You know, this was the middle 80s, it was easy to do. Former pace car driver Becky Williams was the first woman ever to pace a NASCAR sanctioned event on a super speedway in two different places. And it's not just officials, crew chiefs, support staff. Bob Weeks came out of Nashville, went to NASCAR as one of their top PR people. Tom Roberts left this facility and opened up TRPR, which has remained for the last 26 or 27 years one of the top two firms on the Cup circuit. And of course, you cannot forget, well, he was young then, but Eddie Gossage, who came through here and is now president of Texas Motor Speedway. What kind of an effect did Nashville have on Eddie Gossage? When they built Texas Motor Speedway, when you enter the garage area at Texas Motor Speedway, there is a gate. If you've ever been to Nashville in the quote old days, you look at it and go, I know that, because he patterned that gate after the old entrance with the candy canes and Humpty Dumpty that entered Fair Park at the bottom of the hill. Those are some things that have happened and just some historical high points for you. One of the things that I think you'll note in the racing portion of this is, even when it starts to get difficult, somehow this place always rises back up. And I think today we take another step towards doing it one more time.
Thank you guys for taking the time to come out here and kind of go over this. This is something that I want to say, as far as everybody at the fairgrounds, but Shane Smiley really spearheaded this thing. Had a great idea with the companies that were invested into the fairgrounds. Everybody at the fair board was 100% into what we were doing. When we first got the keys here, I remember walking in here to the offices of Bear. Everything was completely black and white. I went down to the front, sit down in the bleachers, and I just was out there just looking around, and my daughter came out there and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm watching the race," and she said, "There's nobody here." I was like, "I know, but they're going to be here in a couple of weeks. We've got a lot of work to do." And with the help of all the fairgrounds staff, with the maintenance crew, and people like Donnie Red, Joe, and the thing about this place is, I think, Joe, so you 31 years here, it was easy for somebody like myself or Chad to walk in here and have those guys to lean on. Because anything that was a question, we didn't have to take a stand and say, hey, how do we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. I could lean on the staff that was here. So with the stuff that's being brought to us today, with the announcement today, and with the future of the fairgrounds, it's a very, very huge step as far as with the capability of, with the guys who are supporting this thing, with the future, possibly more than 2 years. There's so many avenues that this could lead to. So when we look at that stuff, I mean, and it is a sensitive side to me, because I do sit here and I do remember in '87, '88 when my dad was down here. Remember Victory Lane. I've got pictures hung up over my office of me here. I remember when I used to tug with his coattail, Joe Williams, and ask when can I go down to Victory Lane because it was 3 to go. I mean, it's it's a very touching thing, and also too to see the kind of momentum that we're gaining every week. When we first got, like I said, every sign here was blank, and you can look behind you and see the signs. And there's 2 more going up here in the next week, and then what we're here to unveil here. And what we're here to unveil here, well, I think, will proceed with the momentum the combination of everything that could lead to something just, I want to say it's probably one of the, besides having NASCAR back, right next to one of the biggest things that's possibly that we could have ever thought about. So other than that, it's very easy to get emotional about it, because you look from, like I said, when we come in here to where it is today, where it could go, how it could go. Steve and everybody at the fair, well, they really stepped up behind us. Anything we need, we make a phone call, the maintenance crew, they're about it, they take care of it. And every day we come in here, there's a new project getting done, whether it's painting this or that, making the place where it used to be. And with the help of all these guys, with the help of the new sponsors, and also with the help of this new group that's coming in, I think that will unload another, I know another exciting 2 years, but I think another avenue for a shot at for another 10 or 15 years for this place. So, you gonna help me do this?
Certainly.
So as you can see, these are our new partners with the Fairgrounds, Curran Sports, and Big Machine Records. Those guys itself, it has momentum in racers' terms that is crazy. With the momentum these guys will carry us to, with the combination of country music, with the combination of with their leadership, their involvement in motorsports, our involvement in motorsports, also to carry this place to the next level. I mean, with Scott winning 3 championships here, tons of races. Mike Curb with the whole, I mean, everybody knows what Curb is about. You've seen it with Dale Earnhardt, his car on Richard Petty stuff. I mean, it's just an involvement that there's no way to simply explain to the excitement. And 3 weeks ago when this first came up, Shane was talking about it, and I was like, how far is that out? How far out of reach is that? He's like, no, they want to sit down and talk. And so 3 weeks ago today, I'm going to tell you, last night when he called and told me I had to sign a contract, I think that was, well, I think I passed out on the couch about 9 o'clock. She had to wake me up this morning. So it was just, like I said, this is the one step that I think that that would carry us to the next momentum, to the next, you know we have 2 years this year, next year, but I think with these guys, from the political side of it, from the racing side of it, from every side that the Fairgrounds here needs to have the backing, now that we have. So I want to thank those guys, and like I said, with the incredible logo, it's almost speechless. So I mean, it's a situation that and we can just go on and on about. So we're really excited here and look forward to another 2 years, and hopefully many, many more.
Brief statement from Chad Chapman. He was unable to be with us today. Had some business ventures previously that was going on, and he wanted me to state this to the media. On behalf of Fairgrounds Speedway, I'm very excited to have 2 such extraordinary sponsors, Curb Sports, Big Machine Records. Their sponsorship of Fairgrounds Speedway will help elevate our track and only benefit the ongoing success of the Speedway. I appreciate everyone being here today. I have a brief personal thing that I would like to add. My father, about a week before his death, had said this to me about this track. I went back to this. He said, never forget our memories, but continue to build and make us proud. And that, I think, is what Fairgrounds Speedway and the family that supports the track here is all about. Thank you for being here.
How long is their contract?
It's a 2-year deal.
2 years.
2 years of primary sponsorship, and we actually have a couple of statements from Mike and from Scott. From Mike Curb. Curb Records and BigMachineRecords.com are really proud to be a part of the exciting new racing seasons at the Fairgrounds Speedway. And a quote from Scott Borchetta, president of Big Machine Records and BigMachineRecords.com, says, "The Fairgrounds Speedway is very near and dear to me, as I have spent many Saturday nights racing on this oh so famous and important racetrack. The memory and the achievement of 3 Super Truck Championships, 03, 04, and 05, and a still standing qualifying track record never leave me. The Big Machine Label Group is proud to again partner with Mike Curb and continue in the spirit of our shared Indy 500 win at this year's historic 100th anniversary of the great race with driver Dan Weldon. Going green next time by." So, and I have copies of those for everybody. I will have a copy of the PDF that I can send you.
Shane, can you say practically what this will mean in terms of signage and other activity to promote the?
Their primary signage is going to be on the walls, in the corners, and on the front wall. You will see Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway, sponsored by Curran Sports and BigMachineRecords.com. The back side of the scoreboard that you see is a 40 by 60 billboard that faces Wedgwood Avenue and 4th Avenue. So as you come in, that is going to be the gateway into the fairgrounds now, is to see this new logo and signage. They're going to help us with some promotions. We're going to have some giveaways. We're probably going to have some of the artists from the two labels doing national anthem. We're working on some things to possibly do some little mini concerts, either pre-race or post-race. These guys are so innovative in what they're doing in the music industry, and their passion for racing is so strong that once we get to the next step and get this done, there's no telling what's going to come out of their heads. And we're all about trying to help them move forward as they're trying to help us move forward. I think with their name being attached to it, it solidifies how important this place is to so many. And you're going to find more people that have been thinking about coming out and sponsoring. And going, well, you guys really back? I've had a couple ask me as we've been talking about billboards. Are you really back? Are you really strong? Well, this verifies that we're strong and that we're back.
Shane, do you think with Mike Curb name and Scott Forchetto name now attached to the fairgrounds in an official capacity, this is going to change the landscape of politics that's involved in this?
Well, one thing's undeniable. They're two very strong names in business, and especially with the Curb name of everything that's happened with Belmont, Vanderbilt, it can't hurt.
Yeah, talk about, and he was kind of alluding to this, but this announcement in light of the referendum vote on August 4th, kind of what you think this might mean, what kind of effect you think that would have on that vote?
The referendum is important to this place. Everybody knows it, and everybody's worked very hard to get the referendum passed, ratified, on the ballot, getting the word out there to the citizens of Nashville to go out there and vote on August 4th and say fairgrounds, yes. But like I said, it can't hurt. This is good news all the way around, and you know, I've talked to a few of the politicians about what we've got going on, but today's not about the politics. Today's about moving forward with the racetrack and doing everything we can. If we put on a great show, and we have 13 shows left in 2 years to prove that we're a viable form of entertainment and a viable form of income for this property, that's our goal. Put on the best shows we possibly can, raise the bar every week, and exceed expectations. If we can do that, the rest of it will fall the way it needs to.